I knew the HOA in this neighborhood was bad, but I didn't know they were full-on tyrants until my moving truck got blocked at the front gate by some rent-a-cop in a golf cart. It was 7 in the morning. Sun barely up. My wife Lana and I had finally bought our first house, 3 bedrooms, big backyard for our son Gavin, and most importantly, no more renting. I was riding shotgun in the truck, and Lana followed in the car with Gavin in the backseat, half asleep with a stuffed dinosaur jammed under his arm. We were excited, nervous, ready to start fresh. Then she showed up. Her name was Deborah. Of course it was, stringy blonde bob, oversized sunglasses, clipboard clutched like it was a weapon. She stepped in front of the truck like she was stopping a tank in a war movie. "You can't bring that in here," she snapped, tapping the hood with a red manicured nail. "Trucks over 20 feet need a permit." I leaned out the window. "It's a moving truck. I live here now." She barely looked at me. "Do you have a permit, Gregory?" I blinked. "How do you know my name?" Deborah raised the clipboard. "HOA records. You closed escrow Friday. Didn't you read the rules packet I had? All 42 pages of it. Nothing about needing a permit to move in." "Ma'am," I said, trying to stay calm, "my family's behind me and the truck's burning rental hours. We're not unloading a circus, just moving boxes into our house." She crossed her arms. "No permit, no entry. You can park outside the gates and carry everything in by hand." The security guy, a teenager with a fake badge and a real attitude, just stood there, arms folded, like he was guarding Fort Knox. I looked at Lana through the rearview mirror. She was already shaking her head, mouthing, "Don't lose it." I took a breath. "You're blocking my lawful access to my property. That's not gonna fly." Deborah smiled, the kind of smile that says she's been waiting for this exact moment to ruin someone's day. "Rules are rules. I'm the HOA president." "You should have planned better." I grabbed my phone and dialed. "Who are you calling?" she asked. "The county sheriff," I said. "If you're illegally denying access to my property, that's false imprisonment." She laughed like I just told her the moon was made of cheese. "You're being ridiculous." I put the phone to my ear. "We'll let the law decide." The dispatcher picked up quick. I gave her the situation, clear and polite. A private association was preventing me from accessing my own property without any legal basis. She asked if anyone was being threatened. I said no, not yet, but they were interfering with a lawful move-in. Behind me, Lana stepped out of the car with Gavin still clutching his dinosaur. She folded her arms and leaned against the hood, watching. She was always calm under pressure. But I could tell by the way she kept glancing at the truck's digital clock that we were on borrowed time. "They'll send someone out," I said, ending the call and tucking the phone back in my pocket. Deborah raised one eyebrow. "You're wasting taxpayer resources over a moving delay." I looked at her clipboard. "Actually, I'm documenting unlawful obstruction of property rights. You might want to get your legal team on standby." "I am the legal team," she said, eyes narrowing. That was interesting. I'd assumed she was just one of those self-appointed neighborhood tyrants. But if she was actually claiming legal authority, things just got a whole lot more serious. "Then you know you're walking a fine line between civil nuisance and criminal interference," I said. She stepped back, finally out of the truck's path, but the security kid didn't budge. He just looked nervous, shifting his weight like he was waiting for permission to breathe. "Until law enforcement arrives," Deborah said, "this truck does not pass." I sat back in the cab and killed the engine. "Fine. We'd wait." 15 minutes later, a cruiser rolled up to the gate. Deputy Morales stepped out, tall and broad with mirrored glasses and a no-nonsense walk. He looked from me to Deborah to the security kid, then back to me. "You the homeowner?" "Gregory Miles. Closed Friday." "Just trying to move in." He turned to Deborah. "You the one who called this in?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she pulled a folded sheet from her clipboard. "Under the Rosefield Estates Covenant, Section E, Paragraph 4, we require oversized vehicle permits for." He held up a hand. "Ma'am, I'm not here to interpret HOA bylaws. I'm here because someone reported unlawful obstruction of property access. That's a civil matter unless it crosses into criminal interference." So let's get one thing clear. Are you preventing this man from reaching his home? She hesitated. We're enforcing policy. That's not what I asked, she stiffened. This truck violates the community's traffic size limits. It's a safety issue. He turned to me. Is there an alternative entrance? I shook my head. Single gate community, this is it, he nodded. Then looked at the security kid. You got authority to block this vehicle? The kid glanced at Deborah. She told me to. Let me be clear, Morales said, stepping closer. If you block this truck again without a court order or emergency condition, you could face criminal charges, not the HOA. You? The kid stepped back like he'd touched a live wire. Deborah opened her mouth, but Morales cut her off. Ma'am, I'm going to advise you to step aside. This is not a matter for your HOA. It's a matter of private property rights. If you believe a violation occurred, you can file a civil complaint. But you do not get to enforce policy with physical obstruction. She didn't move. He leaned in, voice low but firm. You want to spend the afternoon in a holding cell? That did it. She stepped aside, breathing through her nose like she was trying not to explode. I fired up the engine and eased through the gate. Morales gave me a nod as we rolled past. Document everything, he said. They've been warned. Lana followed through behind us, her window down just enough to give Morales a grateful wave. Inside the neighborhood, it was like driving into a different world, perfect lawns, identical mailboxes. A silence that felt sterile like a museum. Lana pulled up beside me once we reached the driveway. She was waiting for us, she said. That wasn't random, I nodded. She had my name ready before I even said a word. Gavin hopped out of the car, eyes lighting up at the backyard we'd promised him. He dashed around the side gate with his dinosaur, already exploring. We started unloading, and for a while it was normal. Cardboard boxes, a cooler full of sodas. I got the couch in with only one scraped knuckle. But around noon, the doorbell rang. It wasn't Deborah this time. It was a man in a polo shirt with the HOA logo stitched over the heart and a clipboard of his own. Mr. Miles, he said, I'm here to issue a formal citation for non-compliant vehicle access. I stared at him. The sheriff just cleared us to enter. Yes, well, that may be, but under our bylaws you're still subject to administrative penalties. This is a first notice. A fine of $250 has been assessed to your account. I took the paper without reading it. And who signed off on this? The board voted this morning. You mean Deborah voted, alone? He glanced down. The president has discretionary authority under emergency conditions. What emergency happened between me entering the gate and now? He didn't answer. Just handed me a yellow carbon copy and walked off. Lana leaned in from behind the door. You're not paying that. Not a chance. I spent the next hour reading through the HOA's governing documents again, this time with a lawyer's eye, which I was. 20 years in civil litigation before I took a job teaching law at the community college. I hadn't planned to weaponize my bar license against suburban nonsense, but here we were. There was nothing in the rules about fines for first-time vehicle access. Nothing that allowed a single officer to assess penalties without a formal hearing. And the emergency authority clause only applied to natural disasters or structural damage not moving day. I wrote a formal notice of dispute, citing 5 separate violations of due process under the Davis-Sterling Act. Then I printed 3 copies in hand, delivered one to Deborah's mailbox, one to the board's drop box, and one to our fridge. By sunset, we were mostly unpacked. Gavin was asleep on a pile of blankets. Lana was on the back porch with a glass of wine. I joined her with a soda and sat down beside her. So, she said, we just declared war on the HOA day 1. Not war, I said, just due process. She laughed once, short and tired. You think she's gonna back off? No. But I think she just made her first mistake. Because while she was busy flexing her imaginary authority, she forgot one thing. Everything she did was documented. The call to the sheriff, the false claim of an emergency, the fine with no hearing, and I knew exactly where to take it next. The next morning, I was on my laptop before sunrise, cross-referencing the HOA's bylaws with the civil code. I'd already filed the notice of dispute, but I wasn't going to stop there. If Deborah and her little junta wanted to play bureaucratic hardball, they picked the wrong homeowner. At exactly 8:30, I walked into the county recorder's office with a cup of burnt gas station coffee and a folder thick enough to make a thud when I dropped it on the counter. Inside were copies of the HOA's Articles of Incorporation, a request for public financial disclosures, and a formal inquiry into their registered nonprofit status. If they were collecting fines and enforcing rules under a claim of nonprofit authority, they had better be able to prove their compliance. The clerk, a woman in her 50s with a badge that simply read Marcy, looked over the documents and raised an eyebrow. "Rosefield Estates HOA?" she asked. I nodded. "Yeah." She leaned in, dropping her voice. "You're not the first to come poking around about them." I tilted my head. "Really? Got 2 complaints last month." One claimed the board altered vote counts at a budget hearing. Another said the treasurer's been paying for consulting fees to a company that doesn't exist. "You have the complaint files?" She paused. "I can't hand them over unless there's an open investigation, but you can request a public audit under the Transparency Act. If they're registered as a common interest development nonprofit, they're required to comply." I filled out the paperwork right then and there. By noon, I was home again. Lana was out with Gavin, exploring the neighborhood trails. I took the quiet as a chance to install a set of discrete cameras, one above the front door, one facing the driveway, and another tucked beneath the eaves watching the mailbox. I had a bad feeling Deborah hadn't taken yesterday's defeat well. I was right. At 4 in the afternoon, a white SUV rolled up and parked across from our house. 2 men stepped out. One wore a shirt with the HOA emblem stitched across the back. The other had a camera strapped to his vest. I opened the door before they could knock. "Gregory Miles?" the first man asked, holding a small notepad. "Yes. We're here to conduct a compliance inspection. Routine." I didn't request an inspection. No, but the board has the right to perform unscheduled property audits if violations are suspected. I leaned against the doorframe. "What violations?" He flipped a page. "Unapproved exterior modifications, possible landscaping discrepancies, improper trash receptacle placement." I stared at him. "You're seriously here about garbage cans?" The man with the camera started recording. I folded my arms. "You're trespassing." "I haven't received notification of any violations. You're not entering my property without a court order." The camera guy didn't stop recording. I pulled out my phone and began filming too. "You're violating Civil Code Section 4715. No inspections without 72 hours notice unless there's an emergency. This isn't one." The notepad guy didn't flinch. "Then you'll be reported as uncooperative." I gave a dry laugh. "You can report me to whoever you want." "You're done here." They left, but not before taking photos of my mailbox and measuring the distance from my porch light to the sidewalk with a laser rangefinder. That night, Lana and I sat on the porch with the cameras running and a printout of the HOA's last annual budget on the table between us. I'd gotten it through public records. Something stuck out immediately. "Look here," I said, pointing to a line item buried near the bottom. "Security services $18,000 paid to a company called Apex Civic Solutions." "What's wrong with that?" Lana asked. "Apex doesn't exist." I pulled up a business license search. Nothing. No entity by that name registered in the county, no tax ID, no contact number, just a P.O. box that traced back to a UPS store 20 miles away. "You think they're laundering HOA funds?" she asked. I nodded slowly. "Or someone's pocketing money under a fake company name." We filed a fraud report with the state regulatory board that night. I included copies of the financial statements, the non-existent business license, and the invoice trail showing 3 years of payments to Apex, which, conveniently, always rounded to even amounts and were never itemized. The next day, things escalated. I got home from dropping Gavin at school to find a bright orange violation notice taped to our garage door. It accused us of deliberate obstruction of compliance inspection and imposed a fine of $500, due within 10 days. No signature, no hearing offer, just a threat. I walked straight to the sheriff's substation and handed them the folder. Deputy Morales wasn't on duty, but a woman named Sergeant Hill took over. She had a quiet, analytical way of reading documents, no emotion, just silent calculation. When she finished, she glanced at me. "You sure about Apex Civic Solutions being fake?" I nodded. "I've practiced corporate law for 20 years. I've never seen a vendor this cleanly non-existent." She tapped the invoice page. "So they're collecting money from homeowners and funneling it into a ghost account, or someone's account." "But yes," she stood. "This is enough for a preliminary fraud inquiry. I'll file it with the county's white-collar division. If even $1 of HOA dues were misappropriated, it's a felony." That night, I got a call from a man introducing himself as Detective Arlen from the county's Financial Crimes Unit. He confirmed that Apex had never filed a tax return, never issued a W-9, and had no payroll history. "We suspect the payments are being rerouted," he said. "Could be internal embezzlement." I asked if that included the fines being levied. He paused. "If they're collecting fines under false pretense and depositing them into the same fund Apex is linked to, then yes." That's fraud. 2 days later, I received a letter in the mail not from the HOA, but from the county prosecutor's office. It confirmed that an active investigation was underway and that I would be contacted as a witness. It also stated that all further enforcement actions by the HOA against my property were to be frozen pending review. Lana read the letter over my shoulder. "So that's it. They're finally getting nailed. They're getting watched," I said, "which is worse for people like Deborah. They don't know what the investigators already know, so they'll panic." And panic they did. By Friday, 3 other homeowners approached me. One had received a fabricated violation for unauthorized holiday decorations in June. Another said their dues had jumped without notice, and the board refused to provide a budget breakdown. The third claimed the HOA added a maintenance surcharge for lawn care on properties the HOA didn't own. I met them in our backyard and laid it out. "They're running a racket," I said. "And now they know someone's digging, so they'll start trying to cover their tracks." "Can we fight back?" asked the woman with the holiday fine. "We already are," I told her, "but if you want to help, start documenting everything. Letters, emails, photos, timestamps. Keep it off your phone's use paper. If the HOA tries to access your digital accounts through some shady bylaw, I don't want them deleting evidence." They all nodded. By Sunday, the cameras caught something. At 3 in the morning, a figure in a hoodie walked up to our mailbox, pulled something from a pocket and shoved it inside. I retrieved it before dawn. It was a letter. No return address. Just a single line typed on plain office paper. "Stop digging or your family gets buried in paperwork." Lana called Sergeant Hill while I installed a 4th camera facing the street. The investigation had crossed a line. What started as a blocked moving truck had become something much darker: fraud, threats, and a paper trail that led straight to the HOA president's clipboard. And I was going to make sure every last signature she ever forged came back to haunt her. By Monday morning, the letter from the mailbox sat sealed in an evidence bag on Sergeant Hill's desk. She'd taken it seriously, more seriously than I expected. Threats tied to an ongoing fraud investigation weren't just petty noise anymore. They were obstruction, and that meant the gloves were off. She asked if we had any reason to suspect who delivered it. I told her I had an idea, but I wasn't about to name names without proof. She said the county's digital forensics team was already reviewing the footage from our cameras, matching timestamps against known HOA patrol routes and board member routines. By the time I got home, a black sedan with government plates was parked across the street. Two men in suits were speaking with our neighbor, Mrs. Kwan, who looked halfway between confused and delighted to be part of something official. I waved as I walked up the drive. One of the men approached. Gregory Miles? Yes. Detective Raymond, State Auditor's Office. We're following up on documentation you submitted through your fraud report. We're verifying two things: misappropriation of HOA dues and unlawful contracting with a non-registered entity. Glad to help. I've got a full data pack ready. I led him inside, handed over the USB drive, and walked him through my chain of documentation bank record screenshots, meeting minutes Deborah had tried to hide by distributing verbal-only updates, and a notarized letter from a former board secretary who'd quietly resigned last year. She claimed Deborah overrode votes on financial matters by counting absentee ballots on her own time. Raymond didn't react much, just took notes and asked precise questions. At one point he paused over a spreadsheet I'd assembled showing dues increases over the last 3 years. Each hike was paired with a mysterious legal consulting fee that lined up with Apex Civic Solutions' payment schedule. Did you ever see a contract between the HOA and this firm? No. I requested one through formal disclosure and got ignored, twice. He wrote something down. That's a direct violation of the Common Interest Development Transparency Act. He left with the drive and a copy of my evidence binder, said he'd be back in touch soon. That afternoon, a letter arrived by certified mail. This time, it was from the HOA's legal counsel, an actual law firm, not a name Deborah had scribbled onto a napkin like Apex. The letter claimed I was engaging in harassment of board members and threatened legal action if I didn't cease and desist unauthorized surveillance and defamatory accusations. I scanned it, then laughed. Lana looked up from the dining table where she was helping Gavin with a school art project. What now? They're trying to scare me with a cease and desist. Can they? Not legally. Everything I've done is protected under whistleblower statutes, and I haven't published anything publicly. They're bluffing. What do? We don't respond. Let them file. Discovery alone would destroy them. 3 days later, things exploded. I came home from work to find a blue tarp covering the HOA's community bulletin board near the clubhouse. Yellow tape cordoned off the area. A uniformed officer from the district attorney's Special Investigations Unit stood watch, clipboard in hand, as residents gathered in clusters whispering. I approached from the sidewalk. The officer stopped me. Sorry, this area's restricted for now. What happened? Grand jury subpoena was executed this morning, sealed for now. That night, news broke. The local station ran a segment on misuse of HOA funds in Rosefield Estates. They'd obtained leaked documents, undoubtedly from someone inside the county office, detailing how over $50,000 in member dues had been funneled through Apex Civic Solutions, which was now confirmed to be a shell company registered under a fake EIN. The registered address, a storage unit 5 towns over rented under a false name. That name? Deborah Lynn Kessler, our HOA president. The next morning, Deborah was gone. Her house sat dark, blinds drawn, mailbox overflowing, no car in the driveway. Word spread fast. One of the other board members, a guy named Curtis who'd never said more than 3 words to me before, knocked on our door looking pale. We didn't know, he said. She handled the finances on her own, said it was more efficient. You never audited her. She said that was her job. We were just volunteers. Not anymore, you're not, he nodded, defeated. We're holding an emergency vote to dissolve the board. I almost didn't believe it, but the next day, every homeowner received a certified notice of a community-wide special meeting. The agenda: immediate board dissolution, appointment of a transitional oversight committee, and full financial audit by a third-party firm. The meeting was packed. Folding chairs filled the clubhouse, and people stood in the back. I recognized faces, some angry, some confused, some just relieved it was finally over. Curtis stepped to the microphone. We've made mistakes, he said. Some out of ignorance, some out of trust, But what happened under Deborah's leadership has put all of us at risk. We're recommending full board resignation and an independent audit to restore transparency. The vote wasn't even close. 87 in favor, 4 against. Afterward, I was approached by a woman named Marisol, one of the residents I'd spoken to earlier during the backyard meeting. She handed me a folder. "Thought you'd want this," she said. "My husband used to work for the firm Deborah hired for gate security. He found this in a back file. Inside were time logs. The security company had billed for patrol hours that didn't exist, double shifts on days no one was on duty. The signature authorizing the payments? Deborah's. I handed it off to Sergeant Hill the next day. She added it to the case. By that weekend, an interim committee had been elected, 5 homeowners with no prior ties to the board. They announced that all fines issued during the last 6 months were under review and suspended until further notice. The committee also held an open forum where residents could submit grievances and evidence without fear of retaliation. I sat in the back, arms crossed, just listening as neighbor after neighbor stepped forward. One man had nearly been foreclosed on due to a fraudulent emergency maintenance lien. Another had been denied architectural changes for no documented reason. A single mother described being fined weekly for having her trash bins too close to the curb. Each story added weight to the room. People were angry. But more than that, they were ready to fix it. When I was finally called to speak, I kept it short. This neighborhood doesn't need a tyrant with a clipboard. It needs accountability. You don't have to be a lawyer to understand what's right. You just have to pay attention. Applause wasn't what I came for, but it happened anyway. A week later, the state filed charges against Deborah. Wire fraud. Embezzlement, falsifying financial records, threats of retaliation against a whistleblower. Her bail was denied. The prosecutor stated plainly, "This isn't just a story of greed. It's a story of control," and someone finally said no. I received a letter from the county's legal office thanking me for my cooperation and notifying me that the fine issued by the HOA had been officially erased. So had the violation notices. My record as a homeowner was clean. Curtis stopped by one last time. He handed me a small plaque from the old bulletin board. "We're replacing it," he said. "Figured you earned this one." I looked down. It read, "Rosefield Estates, HOA, founded 1994. I turned it over and laid it in the trash can by the curb." I think we're better off without it. As the sun set, Lana poured 2 glasses of wine. Gavin ran through the yard with a kite, his stuffed dinosaur tied to the tail like a co-pilot. The cameras still ran out of habit more than necessity, but things felt quieter now. Real. We had moved into a neighborhood ruled by fear disguised as authority. Now, we were part of a community that had remembered who really owned it.